Welcome back to another episode of Book Eaters Podcast. My name is Michele, and with me is
April.
And we are going to be talking today about robots. And robots have feelings too. So to start off,
Or do they?
I don't know. That's what we're going to talk about. So to start off, I thought it'd be best to make a cocktail around something similar to a robot, which is a character called M-Bot in a series called Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, who's a fantasy writer, but he delves into a little bit of sci-fi here with Skyward. And M-Bot is obsessed with mushrooms.
Oh.
So because of that, I thought it'd be fun to put a little bit of mushroom in our cocktail. And after doing a little bit of research, it turns out that the only thing that people generally put in cocktails is truffle oil. So this cocktail has some white truffle oil in it.
I have never had a cocktail with oil of any sort in it.
No.
And I consider myself a lover of unusual cocktails. So this is a treat for me.
So it'll be 2 parts rum and fill your glass up. I use 8 ounces, those little 8-ounce containers of apple juice. So apple juice, rum, a couple of drops of bitters, and a couple of drops of truffle oil, white truffle oil. So white rum, white truffle oil. And then I also added some vanilla. What I found when I was experimenting with oils is if you add the vanilla right after the oils, it kind of settles on the oil and pumps up that flavor a little bit.
Oh, I mean, you can just smell it.
Right? It's good. Yeah, as I expected. If you sip it.
That is bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
And provoking.
Give it a few. It'll grow on you, I promise.
Oh, I'm sure it will. I've just never had anything quite like that.
Well, experimenting. That's what you do with robots.
But, that would be the question, right? Because oil and water do not mix.
But do oil and rum.
Oh. Science.
They don't. That's why the oil settles on the top. And why the straw, if you drink it from the straw, you don't get as much of the oil as if you drink it from the top.
You had me for a second there. I was like, full on, let's have 3 glasses, and one will have water, and one will have rum, and one will be an undisclosed liquid. All right, let's get into this.
All right, let's get into this. So the first thing that I want to talk about, let's just sort of dip our toes.
Well, why did you pick this? Because this was your concept here.
Well, mostly because I love robots and AI in general, and Cybermen, and I like sci-fi. And I wish that Iris were here because Iris also likes sci-fi, and she would totally have a lot to say on the topic. So,
so this is for you, Iris.
For you, Iris. We miss you. I wish you were here today. But so, not that you're not a great companion. I'm not going to have a lot to add about robots, April, for sure.
We actually kind of got into this last season.
We did when we talked about the coming of age.
Yes.
And whether or not robots can have a coming of age.
And we were opposing viewpoints on that. So
one of the reasons that I find robots so interesting is I was reading a book, and let's jump right into robots and gender, which is the subject I want to talk about anyway. So I was reading this book, and it was called The In-Between. It was by Michael Landweber. And basically in this book, what happens is this little boy, or this family, she works. It's like in the future, and they can transport you from one place to another. So instead of like flying in airplanes, people want to go to Japan, they transport from the U.S. to Japan in like a transport machine. And what happens is this family wins a prize to use the transport because it's kind of expensive. And when they do that, their son goes missing in between. So in between, somewhere between the U.S. and Japan, the child, I don't know if it's Japan actually now, it's been a while, goes missing. So the parents handle this very different ways. Like the husband thinks that he can find him and that he's lost somewhere and that it's easy. And then the mother, Lillian, she thinks that it was sabotage or there's something going on and there's more to it. She sort of investigates what happened. But in that, she sort of is on the lam for a minute where she's like running from things, and she starts to notice the voices around her and realizes that the AI voices are always women. Which is true, right? Like Alexa is a woman, Siri is a woman. A lot of the times whenever
But not always.
Not always, but a lot of the times, even the stock ones, like you can change it to a man's, but it comes as a woman, like a lot of times, right? Those kind of voices. The only thing I think of that maybe is like train stations. Those are usually men, right?
I bet you there is some psychology and research that has been done.
Mm-hmm.
And that informs the choice of whether or not it's going to be a male voice or a female voice.
Well, one of the things that the character thinks about
Mm-hmm.
is that these voices are always very passive and very pleasing, and that somehow does that reinforce this idea that women should be passing and pleasing. And I was like,
Oh.
that's interesting because it's true. Like you would associate the voice
Mm-hmm.
with the feminine, with females, and they're helpmates,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're very passive and they just sit there and wait for you to need them. And then when you do, they help you, right? And it does that reinforce that stereotype? Does that reinforce that? And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. You know,
I don't know that I would agree, although I do think that there is an expectation for women, at least in most societies, to be the helper and the follower and
mm-hmm,
the one who is accommodating. But in a case like that, I don't necessarily think that it would matter. I think it's more in hospitality. I mean, think about it. If you're gonna go to a hotel and the concierge is a man, he's
mm-hmm,
still going to be just as solicitous as a woman would be,
mm-hmm,
or a butler, a great English butler is going to be,
right.
it's the role, not necessarily the gender, I think.
Okay. I mean, I mean, which is an interesting idea to me because it's true that a lot of those voices in my life are feminine.
I think I would go so far as to say if it wasn't a role where it was meant to be in the service industry or hospitality, say it was like a robot or AI program designed to help stop a thief,
Right.
I bet you it would be a male voice,
Right.
right?
But then does that call into the gender roles?
It absolutely does, because I don't think many people would, one, instinctively recognize a female voice as a voice of authority,
Mm-hmm.
and then two, not going to be threatened by a higher pitched female voice because you're going to assume that you could overpower them.
But do you think that that reinforces the stereotypes?
I think it's the no, that's Northern Lights.
Yeah.
What do you call it when the snake's eating a tail?
Oh, yeah. So,
Or Ouroboros, right?
Ouroboros, yeah.
So it's like that. Yes, it's a self perpetuating
Cycle.
situation because it's only that way because we already feel that way,
Mm-hmm.
but we're going to continue to feel that way because it just keeps getting
Happening
reinforced.
that way.
Yeah.
So then there was another tweet that I took a screenshot of, like, I don't know whenever it was. It was a long time. It was like November of 21, but by Monica Byrne. She's an author of a book called The Actual Star. I've never read the book, but in her tweet, she was talking about how robots getting out of control mostly are a fear of white men. That white men are mostly afraid of robots getting out of control, which I'm not sure I agree with because I have a little bit of a fear of that myself. Maybe because I'm a white woman. I don't know. But she thinks that that's a displaced anxiety about women and people of color who've always had sentience gaining a sentience because they mistreat robots or mechanical objects, and then the idea that these things that they've been mistreating suddenly have sentience or life coming back will come back and they'll reap the consequences of their previous behavior. But I don't know that I agree with that. But I thought it was an interesting idea along with this whole concept of robots and gender.
Yeah, it is interesting because when you first started talking about it, I was like, well, why does a robot even need a gender? You know,
But they have one
why
now.
wouldn't you just make it a robot voice? But I think there is a tendency to make robots seem human like.
Right.
And so what's the reason for that? Because I think it's the assimilation
Mm-hmm.
threat that triggers that. If you kept them just as machines,
Mm-hmm.
then I don't think people would feel so threatened.
But I feel we also have to personify everything. Like that's I do. I personify all kinds of things in my life, like, my car and my house and my stuffed toy or my necklace or whatever. You sort of start to give them qualities of being a human because that's the only way that's how you relate to things. And so that's how you start to, or how I relate to things. So that's how I start to relate to them. So it kind of makes sense then that things that could be more human like, we would make human like. But also, like, I'm thinking how they, how that's how they're able to reach me emotionally. Like when I think about, like, remember that Mars rover that like went dark? Its batteries died.
Yes.
I cried. I teared up a little bit about that. Like I was sad thinking about this robot far from home, dying alone.
Working in a thankless.
Yeah, it was sort of heartbreaking to me. And then, when, there was that other experiment, right, with the robot that can dance.
You're talking about the video shared?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an art installation. I think it was like a TikTok video.
Yeah.
It was called I Can't Help Myself. And it really took off because this TikToker played probably one of the saddest pieces of music, the most futile
Right.
piece of music, Exit Music by Radiohead. And so it seemed like the robot was in a bad place and just had been programmed to do a pointless task. And in the video, it made it seem like, it was leaking like this hydraulic type fluid, and it had been built and engineered specifically to clean up that fluid.
Mm-hmm.
And the older it got, the more fluid it leaked. And so it just became more and more pointless until eventually there was no
The
fluid and he died.
and the fluid looked like blood. And then also
Blood.
the robot had the capability to do other things besides clean up its own hydraulic fluid. Like the robot could dance if it wanted to. It could
You can dance
entertain.
if you want to,
Yeah, it could entertain people. And in the beginning, it did.
but it got too.
But then at the end, it got too stressful, and it had to just focus mainly on survival. And I think that was an interesting commentary, like on society about how we just work and work and work and work to
At the
live
expense of the things that are.
at the expense of joy, but also
Also, that's not.
heartbreaking.
Also, the original art installation had nothing to do with that. This TikToker kind of inferred all of that,
Oh, well,
and
cool.
then you put the music with it, and it actually was way more impactful, I think, than the original point of the art piece. But in any case, yes, that was probably one of the most really painful things that I've seen, not just recently, but in my life as far as artwork.
Right.
But only with that interpretation, with that music
Mm-hmm.
and the commentary about what we do to ourselves and the pressure that we put on ourselves and the focus on the things that don't matter. And
I was
very
pretty
disturbing.
I was pretty disturbed by it. And that's just an example of how we put our own feelings and emotions on these
Yes.
objects that don't have these feelings and emotions, but
Yeah.
we give them to them, and that's how we're able to relate to them. But I think that that also stems maybe in that fear of like, oh, they're going to take over the world. So do we want to talk about how being assimilated, since we sort of dabbled about that a little bit, like how much of you must remain human before your qualification of
Well, let's talk a
humanity?
little bit about what are you considering a robot?
So for the purposes of this podcast, I was figuring pretty much any artificial intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily sentient, but any artificial intelligence is sort of a robot or something that does something that's programmed to do it. Like it's programmed to
So,
do a thing.
what about humans who have computer stuff added to them?
Right. Are they still humans? Do they become like cyborgs? Or
I don't
or
know. This is kind of. I don't like talking about this because it's making me a little uncomfortable. It makes me think of back in the days in the South where you had to have, if you had this much black blood,
oh
then
god.
you couldn't be considered white. And they had all these terms for it, like a quadroon and a mulatto. And it wasn't until you got to a certain point that you would start to have rights.
Well, again,
So,
I think again you're personifying the robots, but I think personally, as long as you have your brain intact, you're still human. Because I think it's your brain that makes you human, right?
what about Frankenstein's monster? It never really says like how, but is that's artificial intelligence, right? He was not human, but he wasn't a robot.
But he was made of human parts. He wasn't made of circuitry,
But what animated him?
lightning,
Oh, just electricity.
electricity.
Okay, what about Altered Carbon
Okay.
with Poe?
Yeah,
And he was a hologram,
sure.
but so he wasn't a robot, but that was definitely artificial
So
intelligence.
I mean, for sure, I think that counts for the purpose of this conversation because when I think of like when we're talking about like how much of you has to be remain, like sometimes I think about things like Ready Player One, where they're not in their where they're in an alternate reality and it's just their minds that are attached,
Right.
but not even their physical minds. Or in Lock In by John Scalzi, where they live their bodies are like vegetables, but they can control robots, right? So the robots are them, but their brains aren't in the robots. Their brains are still in their heads, and the robot is sort of behaving like them, right?
Okay, well, then I'm going to say to be considered robot,
Mm-hmm.
be human. I'm just going to say 50% mark. If you're 50% full of biological
Yeah.
cells and such, science talk, insert intelligent science terms, then you're human. But if most of you are machinery, electronic parts,
Mm-hmm.
then you're a robot.
I
And if
think.
your entire consciousness is just projected, oh,
What is that then? If your consciousness.
if it's 100% your consciousness, then you're still human.
So then, it would, if that's the case, then
I guess
anybody
it,
would be.
yeah, I get no, well, no, I guess it depends on how your consciousness is generated. Like if your consciousness is 100% from a human brain,
Right.
then you're human.
Okay.
But if
Your consciousness is from a circuit board, then you're a robot.
and then you're a robot. And if you are a mix of the two, say you have a 100% human consciousness that's just powered and you are controlling a piece of machinery,
Mm-hmm.
you're,
I would say you're still human, but the flip side, if your consciousness is controlled by a circuit board and your body is human, then you're a robot.
I'm not sure alcohol is the right lubricant for this conversation. I
Okay.
feel like we should have went another way tonight.
All right. All right. Well, all right. So let's talk about the real issue.
Which is,
Can a robot really be sentient? And if they are not sentient, is it still okay to be mean to them?
well, Michelle, I would argue that it doesn't matter.
Yeah?
Yeah, because how we treat robots
Mm-hmm.
or animals or automobiles
Mm-hmm.
says way more about us and our humanity than it does about the object.
Oh.
Man, that was deep.
That was pretty deep.
Although I wish I hadn't said object, because that is a really human thing to say about another being.
Okay. Well,
I objectified it.
I mean,
Yeah.
quite literally, right? Calling
Right.
it an object. But we're talking about, like, the straw is an object and how we treat the straw.
But there's no relationship between us and the straw.
But there is also not really a relationship between me and Alexa.
I do think,
But I still don't like it when Rob yells at her.
I think I do liken it to animals, right?
Mm.
We don't know how an animal brain works either.
Right.
We don't know how much they understand. Does a lobster feel pain when you drop it into the boiling water?
I can't imagine that it doesn't.
You would think, but then there's all these, sciencey things that say no, they don't, because of the way their nervous system is. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm never going to know the answer to. So I
Right.
would rather err on the side of caution and just be a good person.
So, like, in books, a lot of times, Mbot, for example, in the latest book in the series of Skyward, the character treats Mbot a little bit shady. Like, I was a little mad at the way that she was treating Mbot, and I think that happens a lot in books and television and movies where robots get kind of shafted.
Oh, believe me, it is a trigger for me for sure. Because all from early all the way up till now, even like right now, the most current show right now is The Mandalorian, right?
Right.
And they had that whole scene where they're in the kitchen.
Uh-huh.
And the robot is designed to be doing all of the chopping and it's very hard not to, because most of the time robots are programmed to do menial labor and chores, right? And it's very hard not to associate that with slavery or indentured servitude,
Right.
because they're just existing to serve other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's a combination. It's going to pull at someone's heartstrings because they're anti-slavery, but it's also going to kind of tap into that horrible human instinct to dominate and see someone who's been subjugated as less than you,
Sure.
And so I'm guilty of it myself.
So that ties in a lot with the Monica Byrne quote earlier, where we were talking about how she was saying how people are afraid of robots taking over because they're afraid that they have sentience and that they're gonna get sentience and we're gonna realize that we shouldn't have been subjugating them all along.
Now I'm saying the opposite, that we are shitty to robots because we
can be.
Yeah, because we can be, and we don't see them as equals.
But are they? Because if they don't have, like, just have robots, like, just have lobsters if they don't feel the hot water.
I mean,
If robots don't have feelings,
when I
then
first
does it matter?
when we first got an Echo
Mm-hmm.
and Alexa was brought into our lives,
Right.
and even Google to an extent, right?
Right.
I would type in my Google question like an
Mm-hmm.
old lady, like politely asking, "Can you tell me blah blah blah? Thank you." You know, it would be that whole thing. Same thing with Alexa.
Mm-hmm.
The impulse at the beginning was to humanize her and be like, "Thank you, Alexa." And then as she's, started to disappoint and fail, now I find myself getting very upset with her,
Right.
right? Because she either doesn't give me the information that I need, or doesn't hear what I am saying, or gives me the wrong version of the song that I have
Ugh,
requested.
God, yeah.
Not only doesn't give me what I want, but tries to substitute it for something else. And then even if it sounds cool, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, yes, as a matter of fact, I would like to wake up every morning to the sound of cats meowing in my ear. She's like, okay, go to the Alexa app. And no, you just made it sound like it was within my grasp. And now you're telling me I've got to go through all these steps. I don't even know where my Alexa app is.
It should be on your phone.
I think it's on my iPad. Who knows? Who goes to the Alexa app?
I do.
Nobody.
I do.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I can program her to play the songs I want to play
You could
without.
just tell her to.
Sometimes I don't want to talk. Sometimes I just want to type.
Not, oh, no, that's where I'm at. That's why I leave all of y'all these voice messages in the chats because it
Right.
takes too long to type. So I just, look, this is going to take too long. Let me just say what I got to say.
Here's the thing about me, though. I can do other things
Oh,
with
here we
that
go with your
when I'm
abilities.
typing. But if I'm talking or listening, I cannot do other things. So, like, if I am on a conference call and listening to the conference call, I cannot say anything to Rob and still listen to the conference call. Like talking and listening. However, I can text and listen and be fine.
Oh my gosh,
Or
I'm the total opposite.
or if so like if I'm watching TV and I want Alexa to turn the lights on in the living room, I can say Alexa turn on the living room lights, but then I miss what's happening on the TV. I have to pause it. But if I just go to the Alexa app and say turn on the living room lights with a button, click click click, turns on the living room light, I'm fine. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, no, I'm the opposite.
I like
The
it.
idea
Plus,
of having to go in and click, click, click is
oh,
like, it's not worth the trouble. But if I
no.
can just say, Alexa, add this shit to my playlist.
Okay. Okay.
Although sometimes she doesn't want to remember what I've named my playlist. And because I have like one new playlist that I've been adding to recently called Old Glamour. I
Mm-hmm.
can't tell you how many playlists I have right now named something that approximates Old Glamour. So how I'm
Oh,
going to get them all into one, I'm going to have to go to the app.
yeah.
And so that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got off track.
That's fine. Yeah. So, so do you think that a robot can really be sentient? I guess that's aside from should we mean to them. Do you think that sentience is possible?
I chalk it up as I do with so many things like religion. I don't know. And I
Okay.
probably will never be able to know. And therefore, I want to err on the side of caution
Right.
and do a good, just thing and treat something with respect. I say that, but then I yell at Alexa too. So, I mean, if
I
I
don't.
could, I'd give her a back massage, but I
She
don't
doesn't
know.
really have a
Respond
back.
to that. No.
Right.
Um, I do think that probably one of the things that really gets me with like when I think about because I have not read a lot of books with robots because I don't read much sci-fi. I mean, I
Okay.
do like fantasy, but never really been huge into sci-fi. But I've seen a lot of movies
Mm-hmm.
uh, and TV shows, and nothing gets me more than the lonely robot. It's
Yeah.
just so hard because you do think, and I think part of it is because like you said, we do try to relate, and we think if that was our lives, that we would become very dejected, and it would be a sad life. And it's easy, at least for me, it's sort of like, Dobby the house elf kind of a situation too. It's easy to sympathize with that type of being,
Right.
because they haven't done anything wrong. They're just trying to do their job, and they don't get any respect, and we can all relate to that.
Sure.
How
Yeah.
many people, I mean, even if you love your boss, and even if you love your job, you always feel like people really don't realize all the great things that you're doing, and if they only knew, you know. And in fact,
Absolutely.
that's a trait of a great worker. It's like the analogy of the duck uh, on the water. You know, they always say, at least,
But you can't see the fate.
yeah, you can't see the feet, just
Right.
you know, that's and that's true.
Right.
But somebody needs to recognize the feet every now and then.
I hear you. I hear you. Sometimes we gotta. Maybe we should have awards for robots.
I'm gonna start. You know what? No, you heard it here first, kids. I'm gonna create a service award for my employees based off of the duck feet.
Oh, that's nice.
Inspiration just now.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I hope I remember that tomorrow because it is
Well,
pretty
it's
good.
been recorded. It's
We'll
recorded.
catch it in
So
the
yeah.
editing if nothing else. What do you think though?
About sentience?
Yeah.
So I think that yeah.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that there's never a scenario. I don't care. I don't think listeners, you can try to pose a question, and I don't think the answer would ever vary. If Michele Karsk is asked, should we treat, is it okay to treat this thing, person, place, or object shitty? Michele Karsk is going to say no, it's never okay.
Well, no, because you want those things to. I mean, there's various reasons why it's never okay. I don't. I think that it's important to be respectful of everything
Okay,
as
what
much
about?
as you can. But I do think that also sentience is possible. I think that it's not only possible, I think it's probable because all it really needs to happen, right, for sentience to happen is that the computer needs to be able to think thoughts on its own and
What if?
recognize that it's and I feel like that's I think that that's coming. I think that within soon we'll start to see that if it's not already happening now.
Yeah, have you ever seen all the bot stuff, like the books that
Yes.
get written by
Yeah.
bots? And
Brilliance.
yeah,
Brilliant.
like it reminds me a lot of Derek in The Good Place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where Janet like creates a boyfriend,
Mm-hmm.
and he's sort of right, but
Not
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 right.
quite right. Not quite right. He's not all the way there.
Well, okay, but what if?
Okay.
Now I'm just going to ask you to. Now I'm going to ask you to go deep.
All right.
What if the robot's design
Mm-hmm.
is like? Did I ever tell you about the book I read called Lightning Rods?
No.
It. I don't want to get too into it because I think when you try to describe it out loud, it sounds very problematic. But it really was a brilliant book. But in this book, basically there are it, it's so complex, but basically, say there's an issue with sexual harassment in the workplace. There are women strategically placed in that workplace
Mm-hmm.
to be lightning rods.
Okay, yes, I do know all about this book. This is the one where the women, or like the plan was for the women to come in and he can have sex with them, but not see their faces.
Yeah, that way they, nobody knows who they are. It's
Yeah,
anonymous. Anyways, trust me, it sounds like it,
but it was written by a woman,
but it
so
was
we're
written
good.
by,
Yeah.
and it was great. So, what if the robot's design is to be a lightning rod, a focus for aggression and all these negative human emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're able to direct them like screen therapy, you're
Right.
able to get it out in a safe, target that's not going to be impacted by it theoretically.
Right.
It makes you less likely to engage, in road rage and cause an accident or murder your girlfriend who left you
Well,
or
to some extent, we're already using drones, you know, to avoid combat fatalities, right? So now in war zones, we're sending drones to drop bombs instead of sending in airplanes, right? So they're not in harm's way, so that if something is ruined or destroyed, it's this robot versus a human life. You know, you have the bomb robots that go into like banks and stuff when they think that there's a bomb. Like we're already kind of using robots to sort of protect us, like in a negative way almost.
but in that case is being shitty to a robot okay?
I mean, I feel like in that case it's designed for that. And the robot, I wouldn't put the robot in unnecessary danger. Just like if we had trained men who went in to find, or dogs that smell for bombs, right? You don't put them in unnecessary danger, but they are in danger. That's
What?
their job,
Well, I mean, if we're talking about robot abuse, right?
right?
There's got to be an opposite. And like I made the joke about giving Alexa a back massage, but how would you reward a robot?
I mean, I don't know the robot would have to be designed to receive rewards of some kind.
And yet we don't do that.
I
Can
mean,
a robot have pleasure?
I don't know. I mean, I'm
I don't know. If we're talking about fictional robots, I think they can. Look at Johnny Five.
right. No, disassemble Stephanie.
Yeah, he loved El DeBarge, you know?
Right.
He lo-
Mbot loved mushrooms.
so, I mean, obviously those robots would be easy to reward.
Right.
But does that exist in real life?
I'm trying to
If
think.
it doesn't, it should. I'm sending out a herald to all robot makers, engineers probably
Engineers,
called.
computer engineers.
If you're gonna program them for shitty things, also program them for joy and happiness. Ooh,
But
or do
they're
you think that would mess the whole thing up? Because now they're gonna have the same sort of, conflict that we as humans do. Do we spend our time on our work, or do we spend time on the things that make us happy?
well, that's what was happening with the
Right.
hydraulic
Can't help
robot, right?
myself. Right.
Right. So they could do joyful things, or they could continue to
I feel
live,
like we
right?
really are misspeaking about the intent behind that art installation.
I
But
don't
for the
know.
purposes of this podcast,
I don't remember. Like I watched a video, probably the one that you shared. So
right, which didn't quite, but still, that's the one that was impactful to me. So we're just going to reference it. Apologies to anyone who takes offense.
for sure, for sure.
Okay.
Also, I don't know how you Google that, but you should Google it. It's pretty cool.
Well, the name of the installation is Can't Help Myself.
Google that. Can't help myself.
Yeah.
Robot installation.
Art.
I'm trying to think if there are any examples. I'm trying to get if there are examples in
real life where,
because I'm like
Mbot
definitely got excited and had emotions, but I mean, there's more to that character obviously than we find out later. I don't want to spoil it for readers. You know what? Because Murderbot, right, falls in love in Network Effect. I feel like there's some reward for Murderbot too. You see some, I don't know, like maybe they get some sort of spike of emotional adrenaline or something. I'm not sure how that even works in a robot. What about like the Borg?
like Star Trek.
Yeah. What do you think that is? Do you think that's
like
robot?
7 and 9.
Yeah, because they like mechanical. They become mechanical when they become part of the collective, right? They're assimilated into the thing. Do you think that that's like? I know I'm just jumping around now.
Well, I think that I sort of associate that with like the stormtroopers. Like if you are able to like be totally brainwashed and buy into it, yes. But they're just like
I don't know that stormtroopers are brainwashed. They're just clones that are raised to be. I guess
they're
they're
not
kind
all
of
clones. Like for the most recent ones, remember that was his whole thing. Is like,
Finn. Yeah.
he couldn't get in. He couldn't assimilate.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that.
I'm still thinking about how you would reward a robot.
Well, you'd have to program them.
Which now sounds sexual, and that's not where I was going at all. But
I mean, there are probably sex robots.
Like in existence or like in fiction?
Both.
There's no way there's a robot for sex right now in this world.
Are you sure?
That would be so expensive.
People will spend a lot of money to put their penis in things.
Yeah, but how do you avoid, short circuiting it when you come to completion?
You probably don't have the circuits necessarily.
You think there
exposed.
are robot sex dolls?
Absolutely.
Google it right now.
I don't have my phone.
I don't either. We're gonna find that out later.
I
just can't believe that if that was like out there, we would know about it.
I feel like it is out there. I mean, they make the dolls, right? How hard is it to make them with robot technology? Like we have robots now that do all kinds of things. If a robot
is better at sex than I am, I'm gonna be pissed.
I mean, they're programmed specifically to do that.
Yeah, but I mean, their movements are so they're even more robotic than me because they're robots. There's no.
I mean, I've never had sex with a robot, and I'm not sure that I would want to, but I would imagine that they can program them to be smooth.
I 100% would have sex with a robot.
Don't you think that that's sort of objectifying them?
I wouldn't want the robot to look like a human though, because that's
No.
creepy.
What do you think a vibrator is?
It's not a robot.
It's a
machine.
It's a machine. So what's the difference between a machine and a robot?
A personality.
Oh, you think?
Well, I mean, for my purposes, I get that no, because there are, robots that can perform, surgery and they don't have a personality. But for me, oh, could I have sex with a robot that didn't have a personality? No, I couldn't. Well, maybe if I played like Sam Elliott movie in the background and pretended like it was coming from the robot.
Oh goodness. I don't know. That's a tough one to think about.
I know what's going in my fantasy file.
Oh, store that one away.
Yeah.
So have you read any books with robots?
I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Okay.
And Marvin was the robot in there.
You read The Dark Tower, right?
I did.
There's a slew of robots in that.
Yeah, but I did not retain much of that except for the people part.
The robot in that was particularly interesting because he kept wanting to give everybody their horoscope.
Yeah.
Do you remember this robot?
No.
Oh, he was kind of a shady character, but yeah, he was like programmed to do things, but also he seemed kind of sinister. Like the robots in the Dark Tower seemed
sinister,
sort of sentient in that respect. Like you could see them like
in a bad way, like a Mad Max kind of way.
But also they kind of just wanted to continue to live. Like there was a sort of like pain when they get shut down in the series. Like they just don't want to not live. Like the giant bear because of robots.
Well, I mean, I feel like as with anything, eventually the subjugated want to overthrow their subjugators,
Well, I mean, the robots didn't want to overthrow their subjugators. They just didn't want to be turned off in the Dark Tower.
Well, and who can blame them? But my point is that all of this fear that people have about robots taking over, underneath that has to be some sort of guilt because you've done them wrong.
That's what Monica Byrne is saying. That it's sort of a weird, like we've been, that they've been sentient all along or whatever, and we didn't realize it. Although I don't know. It's tough to think about it. Did you ever read Demon by Daniel Suarez?
No.
So in that one, what happens is, and I'm just going to spoil it. So if you haven't read it and you want to, like it came out in the 80s. It's past its prime. No, the 90s. It was the 90s. Anyway, so in that one, someone programs a demon, which is like a program loop, right? That happens after, in case of this happens and this happens. And the demon was like doing terrible things, like killing people or blowing shit up, right? But the person that had programmed it had died, and they couldn't get like in front of the program. So like the program was sort of like out there killing people. The demon was out there killing people, but it was still not the demon's fault because it was programmed from a demon. Is just a type of it's just a program. It's not even a robot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like that gets me thinking of like how you kind of like in Altered Carbon, where like they die but then they get brought back to life, and there's like two things happening at once, like like desires and needs that go on beyond death of the human body. How we use machines, AI, to further that.
I do think there is a risk, right? Because if you're programming something to learn, they're going to be better at it than humans are.
Right, like chess.
Right. And so eventually they would figure it out. But would they? I would argue that, the meaning of life, right? The true answer robots would figure it out, and I don't think it would be, conquer and destroy. The real answer would be heaven, you know?
Yeah.
It would be beauty and love and compassion and making sure everyone has what they need, and, you know,
Yeah.
I don't think it would be a negative. I think it would, humans can't figure it out. Please let the robots give it a go,
Why don't we put them on that task instead
right?
of having them trying to figure out how to play chess?
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be like in all of those post-apocalyptic robot books where the robots decide the best thing to do is just destroy humans because we're actually the problem.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Say the worst happens and robots take over, they destroy the human race.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't Earth be a better place for it?
Yeah, probably.
I
Right?
don't know. I mean, what sort of resources would the robots need, and would that?
I would like to think that they would figure out solar panels and then be fine. Right?
There'd be no fracking.
There would be no fracking
There,
or Cylons.
yeah, there would
Sorry,
be.
that was a callback to Battlestar Galactica, which is a heavily in the same sort of concept, like where the robots take over the
Like
Cylons.
like the Matrix.
Yeah,
Yeah. What
but
What do you think is the worst story about robots taking over?
the Matrix is pretty bad. Terminator is pretty bad. Battlestar Galactica is not great either. You know, and you think about Battlestar Galactica, right? They pretty much wipe out the entire human race.
Well, then I would challenge another challenge for the people of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Let the next story be about robots taking over the earth, and they make it all better.
Well, you know, April, you could write that story.
I probably, probably could, because it would be a shitty story. Because there's no climax. There's no like arc of. Michele loves a redemption arc.
There could be a redemption
Now, okay,
arc.
maybe the robots start out like, fuck these humans, they deserve to suffer. And then they, halfway through, as they continue to learn and figure out the, true purpose and meaning in this world, they course correct and,
Yeah.
and learn how to forgive. That sounds trite as hell. I'm not writing that book.
Okay.
I'm going to let it, I'm going to noodle.
New let it simmer.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So we have a bookend, and the bookend is I'm going to read a bit of poetry, and I want you to tell me, was it a computer or was it a human?
Oh, I'm going to be terrible at this because I'm not a good understand. I think you're the best poet I've ever heard.
Aw.
But okay, let's go.
Well, I have chosen some of my favorite poets. So,
Okay.
all right. So the first one is, what key turns in the lock? Who will be let in? To the bright room of what is not forgotten. The scribe turns hacker. DOS displaces Latin. Exiles hoard both. The plain speech of peace forgotten.
Human.
Right.
Ah,
It's a Marilyn Hacker from Squares and Courtyards. The poem is titled April Couplets.
April?
April Couplets.
Oh, that's so
And
sweet.
it's just a small piece of that poem. It's
There was that one piece about the brightness that made me think human.
okay.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. The next one is, you are inscribed in the lines on the ceiling. You are inscribed in the depths of the storm.
I love it. I love it. But I think a robot.
Correct. Computer. Botpoet.com.
Man, I'm
You're
better
pretty
at this
good
than
at
I
this. You're
thought.
pretty good at this. All right. That's another one. Now and again, I feel like an untenanted giraffe against a lineup.
I hope that was a robot.
It is. It's from feeling.js.
Okay.
All right. I think the sea is a useless teacher, pitching and falling no matter the weather, when our lives are rather lakes.
I hope that's human.
It is. It's Marie Howe
That's
from
beautiful.
Nowhere, from
That's
The Good Thief.
beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah.
She's my favorite poet of all time. So you don't have to plug it in there a little bit. All right. There's no one else in the world. There is no one else in sight. They were the only ones who mattered. They were the only ones left. He had to be with me. She had to be with him. I had to do this. I wanted to kill him. I started to cry.
Lonely Robot.
I turned to him.
That's Lonely Robot.
It is.
Oh.
Computer. It's actually Google AI.
Yeah, Lonely Robot gets me in the feels.
All right, ready?
I would argue only a robot could have written that, because only a robot would feel that complete desolation.
Oh.
That complete lack of connection, and yet yearn for it. Sad robots. Get me.
That's very sad. All right, last one.
Okay.
I lift the boy's body from the trunk, set it down, then push it over the embankment with my foot. I watch it roll down in the river and feel I'm rolling with it.
That's neither. That's demon.
It's actually a human poet whose name is AI.
Ah.
And it's from her book The Good Shepherd. Or the poem is called The Good Shepherd, Atlanta, 1981, and it's from her book called Vice.
I have questions, but we can address them.
What are your questions?
Well, first of all, I was better at that than I thought I would be.
You got 100%. Like, you got every single one right.
Well, I didn't get demon right. Well, I mean, I've never met her, so that's still...
Well, that one you did get wrong. And I is amazing. She's an amazing poet. And that was only like a small bit of the poem. So.
What do you think poetry comes from, then?
What do I think poetry comes from? I think poetry comes from...
Because let's be clear, any of those would be better than anything I could write.
I feel like that's not necessarily true.
Don't feel like you need to build me up. I cannot write poetry for shit.
I feel like anybody can write poetry. I think everybody does write poetry.
No, I get too overwhelmed. There's too many words. Too many words to choose from. How am I going to pick a favorite? No, can't do it.
Okay.
I mean, I could kind of see how one day maybe I could write a short story.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think with enough time, I can craft and hone a tale.
Right.
But poetry is something different.
I mean, poetry is just a song without music. It's just a song where the music is the words and not accompanied by an instrument. The instrument is
that. I think a good poem,
the language,
is a story, a song, all of that distilled and stripped away to just the skeleton, the frame. Oh. Yes, it's stark, and it's, just the essence. It's like John Lennon's art, where he could make something look like something with just a few strokes of the pen.
Right.
That's what poetry is to me.
I mean, I respect that, and I think it's very poetic the way you said that, but I think poetry is not emotions.
It's a good drink, Michele.
I don't think that the poetry is emotions distilled. I think poetry is language expressing emotion, but the most succinct way, and using language in a way that's not necessarily formulaic or formatted or expected. Like, you didn't see the way the words were written on the page, but I can tell you that these poems are not written in a way that's, line by line. The lines are breaks and the things are different, because that matters, like the placement on the page and the punctuation, the lack of punctuation, right. Lack of capitalization, all of that stuff that you have to visually see the words as well as hear them in order to fully appreciate poetry.
I would argue that it's sort of like algebra and geometry. If you're good at one, you're not good at the other.
Why can't you be good at both?
Maybe you can, but it would be a rare person, like the person who can, like, on the chalkboard be drawing with their left hand and doing a math problem with their right.
Well, I don't know if you can do geometry and algebra at the same time.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think that you can be good at poetry and be a good novelist, because they are two very different things.
Oh, I don't know.
You can fool yourself, like,
I don't know.
like actors who think they can sing.
What about Maya Angelou?
I said there are exceptions with
okay.
rare talents.
Okay, I'm just... that's the first one that popped in my head. I was like, she wrote books and she wrote poetry.
Yeah, but now I would say maybe a good songwriter could also be a good poet.
I mean, I think music is very much poetry.
but a songwriter could not be a good writer. Maybe a memoir.
I'm going to have to agree to disagree.
Okay, I have another controversial thing about robots.
Okay, wow, all right. Let's do it.
I am not a fan of R2D2. I much prefer C3PO.
Well,
And I hate that he gets, he's the butt of all the jokes.
R2D2 or C3PO?
C3PO.
Did you see that meme about R2D2? Like he's the most profane character in all of TV and movie history. They bleeped out every single word.
Yeah. He's like the Elmo.
Oh.
Okay? Yeah, he's just so cute and everybody
Shade on Elmo
loves
as well.
him.
Wow.
I hate Elmo.
Oh, God.
I'm a Grover fan.
I like Grover.
So, yeah, that's mine.
But I can like Grover without hating Elmo.
I mean, I don't want to push him off of a cliff with my foot and roll down with him, but
I think that poem was about something very tragic that happened in Atlanta in 1980. Like I think there was
like the Atlanta child murder?
Yeah, I think that's probably what that was about. So I don't think it was about killing puppets. I'll lend you the book. You can read it.
I should have paid attention to the context there.
Well, I didn't give you any context. So it's not your fault.
Okay. I feel a little shitty about that.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, it's fine.
That was bad time. I don't think they got the right killer.
No?
Mm-mm.
Oh.
It was not Wayne. Wayne, what's his face?
No? Was it a robot? Robot killers?
I don't know. Maybe they did get the right. Because that's the thing. Oh, we'll have to save this for the true crime
episode. I thought we weren't doing that this season.
Who knows what we might do.
All right.
I play it fast and loose, okay? I told you what my episodes were going to be about, but I've already changed it up once. I'll probably change it up again.
All right, cool.
I like to go with the flow and do what feels organic.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And that's something a robot can never do because there's nothing in them that is organic.
Yet.
I know, Nate was just telling us.
Right, about the circuit board with the human brain cells.
Yeah, they smeared a capacitor chip or something with brain cells and now it's working.
Right? And in all those movies and stuff, like, what do you think about, like, Terminator? How he, like, has, like, human appearance.
But we are going on the assumption that only good things will come for this.
I think it's a great thing. I mean, I don't know that I'm necessarily afraid of robots. They're going to take over the world. I feel like it's going to be a zombie apocalypse. And we're going to need the robots to fight the zombies because they won't have brains. And they don't smell like humans, so they'll be able to kill the zombies for us.
Yeah, I mean, where do reanimated corpses come into play here?
They're not robots because they're not circuitry.
But is it artificial intelligence?
Is it intelligence?
What if it's like a true demon possessing a human? That's artificial intelligence.
No, it's not. It's a demon intelligence.
Yeah, that's right.
Artificial would have to be man-made.
What about Lord of the Rings? All of the Urks.
The orcs?
Yeah.
So they were brought to life by magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think magic qualifies as robots.
For the pits.
Yeah, they were dug up or whatever, right? And they were like in those giant...
They were made of natural resources.
Right, so they were all organic.
Not a robot then.
But also, I think it was magic and not human know-how. And also wizards. It was the wizard that did it, not a human.
What about...
Or maybe it was the Eye of Sauron. I'm not sure.
No, it happened before. No, Sauron didn't make them.
No, the Eye.
Yeah.
Not Sauron, the wizard, but the Eye.
Yeah.
What is his name?
Saruman.
No, Saruman is the wizard. Sauron is the Eye.
Sauron.
Yeah, okay. Wow. So, on a low note, I guess, it's been kind of a mellow episode.
It's been an introspective sort of wrestle with your own humanity kind of episode, Michele.
Well, sometimes we gotta think about things on a deeper level. We gotta have the deep, meaningful conversations in order to move forward.
You need the fodder for the deeper plan?
Yeah, fodder for the deeper plan.
And until then,
eat the books, motherfucker.